In the summer of 1993, a chilling double homicide in Mission Viejo, California, sent shockwaves through both the affluent local community and the international Chinese diaspora. The events of August 18th would eventually come to be known as the O.J. Simpson case of the Chinese community, not only for the high-profile legal proceedings that followed but also for the dark layers of betrayal, wealth, and rage that underscored the crime. It began late that evening when John, a resident of the wealthy neighborhood, heard frantic knocking at his door. As he opened it, he was greeted by an Asian man, his face pale and frantic, pleading in broken English for help. His words were chilling. His wife had been murdered, and his son was missing. John allowed the man to use his phone to call the police. Within minutes, Officer Barron arrived at the luxury apartment complex. The scene he encountered inside the residence was one of horrific violence. On the living room sofa lay the body of a young Asian woman, later identified as 25-year-old Jennifer G. Her black and white polka dot dress was disheveled, her body marred with multiple stab wounds, and a towel soaked with blood rested beneath her left shoulder. Nearby, a baby bottle hinted at the presence of a child. Upstairs, the grim discoveries continued. In a crib in the bedroom, Barron found the lifeless body of a 5-month-old infant, Kevin. A pillow and a shirt stuffed into his tiny mouth left no doubt about the manner of his death. The brutality was jarring. Jennifer had suffered 19 stab wounds, evidence of a desperate struggle to survive, while Kevin had suffocated a crime so heinous it defied comprehension. The man who had knocked on John's door was Jim Pang, a 50-year-old Taiwanese billionaire and a prominent businessman known as the King of Electromechanics. Jennifer was his mistress, and Kevin was their son, hidden away in the U.S. as part of Pang's double life. At the time of the murders, Pang claimed to have arrived in Los Angeles just hours earlier after a long flight from Hong Kong. According to his account, he had tried multiple times to contact Jennifer but received no response. His story painted him as an exhausted traveler who stumbled into a gruesome scene, but skepticism soon surrounded his version of events. Jennifer's life, once bright and filled with promise, had intersected tragically with Pang's. Born into a privileged family in Qingdao, China, Jennifer was well educated and poised for a successful career. She met Pang in 1990 at a trade fair, where the much older businessman was immediately taken by her beauty and charm. Despite being married with children, Pang pursued Jennifer relentlessly, eventually luring her into a romantic relationship. Over time, their bond deepened, with Pang helping her secure jobs and even arranging for her to study in the United States. When she became pregnant in 1992, Pang ensured she gave birth in California, setting her up in a luxury apartment in Mission Viejo. Yet, his visits were sporadic and brief, leaving Jennifer to raise their son largely on her own. The murders were devastating, but they also exposed the tangled web of relationships surrounding Pang. Just days before the killings, his wife Lisa Pang had also arrived in California, staying only a few miles away. This detail ignited a storm of speculation. Could Lisa have discovered her husband's double life and sought vengeance? Investigators began piecing together evidence, but the waters were muddy. A window of opportunity existed for multiple suspects, and motive abounded. Evidence from the crime scene yielded both clues and questions. A brown hair found in the bedroom did not match Jennifer or her child, and a stray shirt button near the door seemed out of place. A kitchen knife consistent with Jennifer's wounds was discovered under the sofa but bore no fingerprints. Bite marks on Jennifer's arm, paired with a saliva sample, offered the most compelling lead. Through meticulous analysis, forensic scientists identified the DNA as belonging to Lisa Pang. However, this finding alone did not solve the case. Questions lingered about the sequence of events, the extent of Lisa's involvement, and whether she had acted alone. Lisa Pang's life story only deepened the intrigue. Born into a modest family in Taiwan, Lisa had worked tirelessly alongside Jim to build their electronics empire. She had trusted him implicitly, but her suspicions began to grow in 1990 after discovering evidence of his infidelity. Confrontations with Jennifer followed, including a notorious incident where Lisa slashed Jennifer's clothes upon finding them in her own home. Despite these fiery encounters, Lisa remained with Jim, a decision that later placed her at the center of the murder investigation. The police had more than circumstantial evidence. They knew Lisa had been in the U.S. at the time of the murders and had exhibited erratic behavior in the days following. Yet her defense team argued fiercely, pointing to inconsistencies in the prosecution's timeline and suggesting other potential suspects. The trial, marked by dramatic revelations and cultural tensions, captivated the public, dividing opinions about guilt and justice. As investigators delved deeper into the case, the narrative shifted from one of passion to cold calculation. Lisa Pang's alleged actions raised the question of whether this was a crime of the moment or the result of simmering resentment. At stake were not just the lives lost, but also the unraveling of a family's secrets, a corporate empire, and the reputations of those involved. The trial that followed would attempt to untangle these threads, but the answers would only deepen the mystery. The investigation into Jennifer and Kevin's brutal murders quickly became a whirlwind of conflicting timelines, scattered evidence, and multiple suspects. Jim Pang, Jennifer's lover and the father of her child, became an immediate focus of scrutiny. His alibi raised more questions than it answered. According to Jim, he had flown from Hong Kong to San Francisco on August 18th, before traveling to Los Angeles, arriving at Jennifer's apartment at 2:30 p.m. But his version of events was riddled with inconsistencies. Why had he waited outside for over 8 hours without forcing entry, especially when Jennifer's life and their child's could have been in danger? Why had he run to a neighbor's house to borrow a phone when there was one inside the apartment? Critics argued that Jim's actions suggested a calculated effort to create an alibi. The theory posited that he may have killed Jennifer and Kevin earlier, cleaned the scene, and staged his call to the police. His motive? Perhaps Jennifer had grown impatient, demanding marriage, threatening to expose their affair, or even pressuring him for financial commitments that could jeopardize his standing with his wife, Lisa. But one glaring inconsistency undermined this theory. Police had determined the time of death to be between 10 p.m. on August 17th and 3 a.m. on August 18th. This timeline didn't align with Jim's arrival in Los Angeles, making it highly improbable that he committed the murders. Attention soon shifted to another potential suspect, a jealous admirer. Jennifer's beauty and charisma had turned heads wherever she went. The disarray of her clothing suggested the possibility of an assault. But this theory was short-lived. Forensic evidence found no traces of male DNA, and investigators concluded that the positioning of Jennifer's underwear was likely staged to mislead authorities. The absence of concrete evidence pointed investigators back to the person who had the most to lose, Lisa Pang. Lisa, Jim's wife of over 2 decades, had been in the United States just days before the murders, staying a mere 3 miles from Jennifer's apartment. Her sudden presence in California raised suspicions. Investigators speculated that she may have discovered Jennifer's residence and decided to confront her. The gruesome crime scene, the overkill nature of the stabbing, and the suffocation of an innocent child suggested a crime of passion driven by intense rage. But for now, these were only theories. The police meticulously combed through the evidence. A brown hair found in the bedroom did not match Jennifer or Kevin, nor anyone known to the case. A stray shirt button, discovered near the bedroom door, also remained unaccounted for. A knife consistent with Jennifer's stab wounds was recovered beneath the sofa, but it lacked fingerprints, rendering it useless in directly linking anyone to the crime. The bite mark on Jennifer's arm, however, held promise. Forensic experts extracted a saliva sample, but the degraded DNA yielded limited results. It was only after months of analysis that they determined the DNA matched Lisa Pang's profile. With this revelation, the case took a dramatic turn. Lisa, who had returned to Taiwan after Jennifer's death, became the prime suspect. The bite mark evidence placed her at the crime scene, but it wasn't enough to secure an extradition. U.S. authorities faced a legal conundrum. Taiwan did not have an extradition treaty with the United States, complicating efforts to bring Lisa to trial. Determined to advance the case, the Los Angeles police devised a plan to lure Lisa back to the U.S. under the guise of helping to offer a reward for information on the killer. In January 1994, Jim and Lisa Pang returned to the United States. They were ostensibly cooperating with the authorities, unaware of the trap being set. As soon as they arrived in Los Angeles, investigators began their meticulous process of gathering additional evidence. Forensic experts quickly took a fresh blood sample from Lisa, hoping to confirm the DNA match to the saliva found on Jennifer's bite wound. A few days later, on January 8th, The police summoned the entire Pang family, Jim, Lisa, and their 2 sons for questioning and polygraph tests at the Mission Viejo police station. The tests yielded immediate results. While Jim and the 2 sons passed their polygraphs, Lisa repeatedly failed. The inconsistencies in her responses only deepened the investigators' suspicions. During a private interrogation, Lisa denied any knowledge of Jennifer's whereabouts on the night of the murders. But when pressed about her injured leg spotted by officers during a visit to her home in Taiwan shortly after the crime, her story began to falter. Lisa claimed she had fallen at home, but her younger son, under questioning, said he couldn't recall such an incident. By 6:30 p.m. that evening, the police had enough evidence to formally arrest Lisa Pang. The bite mark and saliva DNA, coupled with her failed polygraph, painted a damning picture. News of her arrest sent shockwaves through both the local and international Chinese communities. Lisa, a woman once admired for her dedication to her family and her pivotal role in building her husband's business empire, now stood accused of a heinous double murder. As details of Lisa's life came to light, a tragic narrative of betrayal and revenge began to unfold. Lisa and Jim had built their fortune together, starting from humble beginnings in Taiwan. Lisa's unwavering support had been the foundation of their success. She had even borrowed money from family and friends to help Jim start his electronics company. Over the years, their business flourished, expanding across Asia and into the United States. But cracks in their marriage began to appear after Jim's fateful business trip to Qingdao in 1990, where he first met Jennifer. Lisa's discovery of Jennifer's existence marked the beginning of her unraveling. From finding a lipstick-stained shirt in Jim's suitcase to uncovering the frequent phone calls to Qingdao, Lisa's suspicions grew. She confronted Jim multiple times, but her efforts to sever his ties with Jennifer proved futile. Each encounter with Jennifer only deepened Lisa's humiliation, whether it was finding Jennifer living in her home in the US or slashing Jennifer's clothes in a fit of rage. The birth of Jennifer and Jim's son, Kevin, appeared to be the breaking point. The realization that Kevin might one day claim a share of the family's substantial fortune likely fueled Lisa's growing resentment. During her trial, which began in May 1995, these details became the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. They argued that Lisa's jealousy and anger culminated in the premeditated murders of Jennifer and Kevin. Prosecutor Robert Mako described a chilling sequence of events. Lisa had learned Jennifer's address by spotting a number on the family's phone bill. On the night of August 17th, after her children were asleep, she visited Jennifer's apartment under the pretense of a negotiation. But instead of talking, she attacked Jennifer as soon as the door opened, stabbing her repeatedly in a blind rage. Kevin's murder, Mako suggested, was driven by Lisa's desire to erase all traces of Jennifer's connection to Jim and the family. The defense, led by renowned attorney Marshall Schulman, fought back vigorously. Schulman pointed out the lack of direct evidence linking Lisa to the crime. The DNA on the bite mark, while significant, didn't prove murder. Schulman also highlighted Lisa's petite stature and questioned how she could have overpowered Jennifer, who was taller, athletic, and a former tennis champion. He proposed an alternative theory: Jim himself had committed the murders. Schulman pointed to Jim's suspicious behavior on the day the bodies were discovered, including his inexplicable decision to wait outside the apartment for hours and his reliance on a neighbor's phone, despite there being one inside the home. As the trial progressed, the courtroom became a battleground for fierce legal arguments. The prosecution relied heavily on forensic evidence, including the bite mark analysis, while the defense poked holes in the timeline and argued for reasonable doubt. Outside the courtroom, the case polarized public opinion. Some sympathized with Lisa, viewing her as a wronged wife driven to desperation by her husband's betrayal. Others condemned her, believing that no amount of betrayal could justify such a brutal act. The jury's deliberation was fraught with tension. After weeks of testimony, they initially failed to reach a unanimous verdict. 2 jurors, swayed by Schulman's arguments, refused to convict Lisa, forcing the court to declare a mistrial. The case was retried in 1996, and this time, the jury found Lisa Pang guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The conviction of Lisa Pang sent shockwaves through both her family and the international Chinese community. Many who followed the case closely continued to debate the validity of the evidence presented. While the bite mark and saliva DNA were critical to the prosecution's case, doubts persisted about their reliability, especially given the lack of direct evidence linking Lisa to the murders. Lisa's legal team, undeterred by the verdict, immediately began working on her appeal. They argued that the recording of Lisa's conversation with Jim at the police station had been obtained unlawfully and should never have been admitted as evidence. This recording, in which Lisa seemed to acknowledge a physical altercation with Jennifer, had heavily influenced the jury. Without it, her attorneys claimed, the outcome of the trial might have been different. In 1999, the California Court of Appeal ruled in Lisa's favor. The court found that the recording had indeed been obtained in violation of her rights and could not be used as evidence. The conviction was overturned, and Lisa was granted a retrial. This decision reignited public interest in the case and reopened old wounds for Jennifer's family, who were devastated by the prospect of seeing Lisa walk free. For the retrial, Lisa's defense team brought in high-profile forensic experts, including Dr. Michael Baden and Dr. Henry Lee. Dr. Lee scrutinized the crime scene evidence and identified several anomalies that supported the defense's claim of Lisa's innocence. He pointed to a large male handprint found on a blood-stained pillow, suggesting the presence of a third individual at the crime scene. This raised the possibility that someone else, perhaps even Jim or another unknown person, had committed the murders. The defense also questioned the timeline of the crime. They argued that the initial estimate of the time of death might have been inaccurate due to the high temperatures in Mission Viejo in August, which could have accelerated decomposition. This alternative timeline, they claimed, further distanced Lisa from the crime scene. During the retrial, the prosecution struggled to rebuild their case without the critical recording. While the DNA evidence remained compelling, the defense successfully cast doubt on its significance, arguing that Lisa's DNA could have been transferred to Jennifer's body during a previous altercation. Without the recording or new forensic evidence to directly tie Lisa to the murders, the prosecution faced an uphill battle. In 2002, nearly 9 years after the murders, the retrial concluded. Judge William Froberg, weighing the available evidence and the arguments presented, opted for a plea agreement. Lisa Pang was sentenced to 11 years in prison for her role in the crime. However, since she had already served 7 years, she was eligible for release later that year. She was deported to Taiwan upon her release. Lisa's release marked the end of a long and contentious legal battle, but it left many questions unanswered. Jennifer's family remained convinced of Lisa's guilt and lamented the lack of closure. Meanwhile, Lisa returned to Taiwan, where her life after the case remains shrouded in mystery. Some reports suggest that she and Jim divorced, while others claim they remained together and resumed a semblance of normal life. The case remains a point of fascination and controversy, often compared to the O.J. Simpson trial for its high-profile nature, complex legal battles, and polarized public opinion. For some, it represents a miscarriage of justice. For others, it underscores the flaws in the legal system's handling of evidence. Regardless of where one stands, the tragic deaths of Jennifer and her infant son, Kevin, serve as a haunting reminder of the devastating consequences of betrayal, jealousy, and unchecked emotions. Despite Lisa Pang's release and deportation to Taiwan, the story of Jennifer and her son Kevin's tragic deaths continued to stir debate and speculation. Many observers questioned whether justice had truly been served, while others believed that Lisa had paid the price for her alleged actions. Even if her role in the crime remained ambiguous, the legal outcome left a bitter taste for Jennifer's grieving family, who felt that the retrial and reduced sentence undermined the gravity of the murders. The aftermath of the case saw Jennifer's family grappling with the loss of not only a daughter and sister but also a beloved grandson and nephew. They described Jennifer as a bright, determined woman who had made mistakes but didn't deserve such a brutal end. Her sister, who had testified during the original trial, expressed frustration with the court's decision to overturn the initial conviction, viewing it as a technicality that overshadowed the evidence presented against Lisa Pang. For the Chinese American community, the case became a stark reflection of the cultural and legal challenges faced by immigrants navigating a foreign justice system. The complexity of the case, involving cross-border relationships, cultural expectations, and the high-profile status of the accused, drew attention to the pressures that often influence influential families. Meanwhile, Lisa's life in Taiwan post-incarceration remained a topic of curiosity. Reports emerged that she had retreated into private life, avoiding public appearances and media scrutiny. Some sources suggested that she separated from Jim, unable to reconcile their fractured relationship after years of infidelity and legal turmoil. Others claimed they stayed together for the sake of their sons, who had endured their own trauma during the case, including the public vilification of their mother. Jim Pang, for his part, appeared to focus on preserving his business empire. Publicly, he maintained a narrative of loyalty to his wife, though his actions throughout the trial, such as hiring high-profile lawyers, were seen by some as attempts to protect his own reputation as much as Lisa's innocence. His statements to the media, expressing trust in Lisa's character and condemning the accusations, were viewed as a calculated effort to mitigate damage to his family's legacy. The broader societal response to the case also highlighted enduring double standards and biases. Jennifer, as the mistress, was vilified by segments of the public, who viewed her relationship with Jim as immoral and opportunistic. Meanwhile, Lisa's actions, while condemned by the legal system, were framed by some as those of a wronged wife pushed to the brink. This dichotomy fueled polarized opinions, with some rallying behind Lisa as a victim of betrayal and others insisting that her actions were unjustifiable, regardless of her motivations. Decades later, the case remains a cautionary tale about the destructive power of jealousy, betrayal, and the human capacity for violence. The tragedy of Jennifer and Kevin's deaths underscores the collateral damage of marital infidelity and the failure of individuals to resolve conflicts without resorting to aggression. For the families involved, the wounds left by this case have likely never fully healed. Jennifer's family continues to mourn the loss of a promising young woman and her child, while Lisa's family grapples with the stigma of her conviction. The Pang family, once a symbol of entrepreneurial success, became a cautionary tale of how personal failures can unravel even the most outwardly stable lives. The case has since faded from the headlines, but its lessons remain relevant. It serves as a reminder of the importance of accountability, the complexities of justice, and the irrevocable consequences of decisions made in moments of anger and despair. Whether Lisa Pang was the sole perpetrator or a scapegoat in a larger conspiracy, the truth of what happened that fateful night in 1993 may never be fully known, leaving behind a legacy of heartbreak and unanswered questions. Lisa Pang's conviction for the murder of Jennifer and her child was based largely on circumstantial evidence and one key piece of forensic data: the bite mark on Jennifer's arm. While the DNA evidence linked Lisa to the scene, her defense team successfully argued that presence alone does not equate to guilt. The defense contended that Lisa's DNA could have been transferred during an earlier confrontation that did not involve murder. This raises a fundamental question: is the presence of DNA sufficient to convict someone of such a brutal crime? Critics of the initial trial argue that the reliance on the bite mark and saliva evidence was not definitive enough, especially when paired with other inconsistencies, such as the lack of eyewitnesses or direct physical evidence linking Lisa to the act of murder itself. Supporters of the conviction, however, point out that Lisa's motive was clear and compelling. Jennifer represented not only a romantic betrayal, but also a financial threat to Lisa's family, with her child potentially sharing in a vast inheritance. The prosecution painted a picture of a jealous, enraged wife who acted out of desperation and fury. This theory aligns with the calculated nature of the crime, which involved both Jennifer and her child being brutally murdered, a level of violence that suggests intense personal motivation.